Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, thank you so very much. Greatly appreciated. So, welcome everybody to Northwest Indiana Green Drinks. And I always have to say, we're in our 11th year and received a couple of congratulations from people in the community that we have existed for 10 years. And we've been bringing to everybody in Northwest Indiana these wonderful informational sessions. And also, we always have an action item at the end that you can do something to really make a difference for our environment. So I also want to say that we acknowledge our sponsors every time. And our first sponsor, of course, is Northwest Indiana Green Drinks. And then our second sponsor is Save the Dunes. And I want to say that Katie Hobgood and also Harshini is with us from staff today. And then thirdly, we need to recognize drumroll 219 Green Connect. And that's the creation of Kathy Sipple, and she does these wonderful podcasts that are published online and just a treasure trove of very interesting topics. Our guest hosts this month are 95.1 FM, AM 1420, WIMS. I was on the radio at 6:45 on Monday morning with them, talking about this and a couple other happenings that are going on. Also, Tryon Farm Institute, and Leslie lives over at Tryon Farm, and they were the ones, specifically Steve Perkins. He started this topic idea because he noticed that butterflies were decreasing last summer. So we had a June session on this. So I want to give a shout out to him and to the Tryon Farm Institute, which is a wonderful conservation and naturalist organization. Natural Habitat Evanston is also a host this evening, and Leslie Shad comes from them. And then also I want to recognize the National Wildlife Federation, because they are the certifying body that many people in our region have already got certification, and Kathy's going to talk more about that. So without further ado, this is our April 6th Green Drinks. Our topic is Save Our Butterflies, how to plant butterfly gardens and establish pollinator sanctuaries. And I'm going to hand it off to Katie for some housekeeping items.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for our presentation tonight. I want to welcome you all watching both on Zoom and on Facebook Live. Just to let you know, if you're on Zoom, you are muted. Just cut down on background noise. But if you do have any questions during the presentation, we encourage you to put those into the chat or the comment section on Facebook, and we will answer as many as we can at the end of the presentations. This presentation is being recorded, and the recorded version will live on the Save the Dunes Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. And we also share those direct links in our monthly e-newsletter. So I want to invite you all, if you're not already on that newsletter, to go get signed up on our website, which is savedunes.org. And we, of course, encourage you to share the recording with your network so that we can get as many pollinator advocates as we can in our region. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Kathy. And Kathy, you are muted. That's my fault. I need to make you a co-host. I'm sorry. Hold on one second. Sorry, folks. Nancy, do you want to get us started with
I'd be happy to introduce myself. I've got no problem with that.
That would be true.
Yeah, not at all. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for including me in this. I am super excited about it. This is, the big picture here is Northwest Indiana going for a National Wildlife Federation Community Wildlife Habitat certification. Lots of wildlife and a lot of stuff in that. But it's sort of a great way to engage the whole community across multiple counties. And we did this in Evanston, and that's kind of why I'm talking at you all. So I'm going to talk to you for just about 15 minutes, and then just explaining what's involved in this. Hopefully you can see that. And yeah, we'll go on here. Okay, so I want to remind, so I do lead Natural Habitat Evanston, and that's where we did this certification in Evanston, Illinois, which is only, 80,000 people basically, and you guys are 10 times that. So it's a much bigger thing. We're in Evanston, we're trying to change the culture of lawns. I want to remind everybody why we're thinking about doing this, or actually we've embarked on it. Kathy's embarked on it. Is, we've all grown up with spattered windshields, and now they aren't. And I mean, I can drive from here to Toledo, Ohio, and I can have two significant splatters on my windshield in July. So it's a concern, and you all know these things, that monarchs and the rusty patch bumblebee is the only federally listed pollinator in the lower 48, and birds declining by 30%, of course, linked to the insect decline, as well as all the other things that are happening in the world. But I think we're turning the corner. I'm not turning the corner, but at least awareness is turning a corner on this. So I'm somewhat, I'm not all despair. But I would say that the thing that really concerned me was reading this article in which, the charismatic megafauna I just mentioned of monarchs and mayflies and bumblebees. That's kind of the charismatic megafauna of the insect world. But the most upsetting or disquieting thing, it was mentioned in the newspaper, that the deeper worry is that a whole insect world might be quietly going missing. So it's something to really care about. And people, a lot of our real estate is turf. It's more land use than corn, wheat, and fruit trees combined, according to NASA imaging. That's part of the issue, and that's part of the thing that we can actually do something about. This is a little picture to share with you what the rusty patch bumblebee looks like. I would hope that in the course of our plantings over the next few years or months, when we're getting this certification, we see some of these. Let's go for that. This has a little rusty patch with some yellow underneath it. There's a similar looking bumblebee called the brown belt that looks somewhat similar to this, but it uses all very common wildflowers that you probably, because I assume that all of you guys are love and respect wildflowers, you'll recognize a bunch of these. It's milkweeds and coneflowers, bee balms and culver root, Joe Pye weed. I mean, we probably have some of the things that these bees love, and that lots of other bees and butterflies love. So what are we doing? So first of all, National Wildlife Federation, founded almost 100 years ago. It works in 50 states and 3 territories, 4 million members. In terms of the habitat program, there are lots of other habitat programs out there. In Evanston, the reason we chose this is that it's kind of a 101 program course in community organizing a community, because it gives you steps by which you reach out to the community, you assess your allies and your challenges in the community, and it gives you a blow-by-blow step to get certified, and each of these steps gives you some points towards certification. National Wildlife Federation, so there are about 150,000 homes certified, 300,000 acres. In the Midwest, there are 32,000 certified habitats. Some of these places that have certified, and Northwest Indiana is, of course, a giant land area, but it includes some of the certified areas include Baltimore and Houston, Fairfax County, Virginia, Charlotte. These are big population areas, Charlotte, North Carolina. So what are the requirements? So the requirements are 750 points based on Northwest Indiana's population. We already have 364 of those. So we're going for basically 430 points for certifying. There are two steps to this. One is certifying properties and one is community outreach. I'm going to talk about both of these. But in terms of certifying, you get, we're going for 430 points or so. You get different points depending upon what you're certifying, whether homes, places of worship, or community properties and parks are 3 points. Schools and nature centers are 5 points. So, the more schools are, sort of readily available at this. And if there are parks, I would hope parks would be readily available. I'm thinking about, you could be any size to certify. So a little municipal park is as valuable as a huge park. You just indicate as you're certifying the size of the park that you're certifying. So I'm going to talk more about the certification and what's involved. But the other aspect of this is in a lot of ways, this is going to be the easier part for us. I think we're all doing, and I expect that we all will continue to do a lot of community outreach and education on issues related to this, whether it's native plants or invasive organisms, animals or, plants. But I'm sure we're also doing a lot of other things and everything that everyone does. So in fact, if there's a municipality that has some, is changing its milkweed ordinance, that counts. If there's a county action to protect some land or do some trail management or something like that, that counts, as well as everything that we may individually be doing through ourselves and through our as residents or as organization leaders in one respect or another. So I'll tell you more about this, but it is the sorts of things that are included were first to get organized, and then partnerships, education in the community, publications, social media, setting up kiosks, all sorts of things count toward getting this 150 points that are also required. So in terms of certification, the top part of this part of it, certifying properties, what's required is one other reason that we chose this program in Evanston is that it's very carrot, not very stick. It's all very self-certification, and you do not easily lose your certification. I mean, National Wildlife Federation wants you to be able to certify. So what you end up looking for is food, water, shelter, a place to raise young, sustainability, which is kind of a cafeteria style menu that you just pick off some of the things that you are sustainable in your ground management. And there is a certification fee of $20 and $30 for the least expensive sign. I always want to mention that so that people aren't surprised by that. So some would say, well, this is too low a bar. If it's, self-certification and we just attest to ourselves of what we're doing. Well, National Wildlife Federation took that seriously and looked at it, and they did find that intentionality creates better habitat. So when you're going through a checklist and you're trying to do all these things, you actually may have more species appearing in your yard. So you can test that, see if that's true, but it kind of makes sense to me that, intentionality raises the bar a little bit. What does it take to certify? So the first of that list for certifying was food. And this is every place, pretty much, if you have passing interest in pollinators or wildlife, you're probably got these things in your yard. Nectar can be a food. Seeds from a plant, a bird seed that you have in a feeder can be a food for insects. If you put yourself in the mind of this little black swallowtail, if you have dill plants, you've got a larval host. If you've got milkweed, you've got a larval host for the monarch. If you have violets, you've got larval hosts for the violet fritillary. So there are lots of ways that we can certify based on food. And so that's just talking about a caterpillar because that's the easiest. But, birds are the same. I mean, most of us probably have seeds or even nectar that can feed hummingbirds, or berries or nuts that can feed all kinds of birds and wildlife. So there's that. Next one is water. Some of us may live near a stream or a pool or pond or something like that. And if you do, that property can get certified. We found that there are a lot of public spaces near the lake or near the different rivers and things like that. And so we just went along and certified all 14 of the parks along the lake and the river, so you can also do that. Think about where there is sort of low-hanging fruit on a water source. But if you don't, for most homeowners, it's going to be a bird bath. This is my high-tech bird bath into which I put a heater in the wintertime, so it can be a bird bath. It can also be a puddling area for butterflies, so even a rain garden, which is a little counterintuitive because a rain garden is actually an absorptive, it absorbs the water, but a rain garden will also qualify as a water source. Cover. So cover, if you put, mostly probably we're thinking about birds. So in a landscape like this, there is cover in terms of mature trees. There's cover in terms of brush and bramble. Burrows, if there are burrows where you are, a meadow can be cover. This is evidence of a bramble, basically. But you can also have a roosting box to provide cover for birds. It's cover for any wildlife. So cover for, you can have cover for insects, although that's almost anything, right? So they've listed these things as possible cover. Similar to cover is a place to raise young, which includes meadows and prairies and thickets and burrows. It can also be a host plant or larval host for caterpillars that I mentioned. This is a place, by the way, this is a chrysalis for a Luna moth. That is a place where young are raised, right? It's already, this guy is not an egg. He's becoming a moth, and this is a swallowtail. But anyway, dead trees or snags, there's a lot of different things can be a place to raise young, especially in the mind of a caterpillar. I've mentioned a couple of times larval host for things, and I just want to pause for a second. I haven't gotten to the last element, which is sustainability, but a larval host, so about 90% of plant-eating insects rely on one or more limited families of plants. And it could be asters, it could be milkweeds. Many people know that the monarch butterfly needs milkweed plants, and without milkweed plants, we do not have monarch butterflies. Well, this is true of 90% of this is according to Doug Tallamy, who's an entomologist from the University of Delaware. 90% of plant-eating insects also rely on one or more limited families of plants. And when you think about what is a plant-eating insect, well, that is anything that eats nectar, pollen, foliage, seeds. So it can include things like ants and beetles and thrips and leafhoppers and butterflies and bees and wasps and all kinds of different things. So this is a field museum guide to common Chicago area butterflies with their larval host associated. So you can't really read this and it's a little fuzzy. But for example, for the violet fritillary, which is a little, this is a fritillary. It looks kind of like this. A violet fritillary relies on violets, and I'm not going to touch on that too much. But for example, during the wintertime, the caterpillar of the violet fritillary burrows down at the base of a violet, and when the air warms up, the little caterpillar emerges and will eat the violets, and then become a chrysalis and turn into a little butterfly. Pearl crescent relies on asters. Some others, eastern commas, the elms and nettles. Nettles are popular. By the way, nettles, everyone thinks, oh, I don't want a stinging nettle in my yard, but there are non-stinging nettles, and I think I might have that slide in here. Spicebush swallowtail. And of course, the health of insects relates to the health of birds. So to feed birds, we want to encourage insects. Many people will be like, I'm not the insect person. I'm not interested, but a lot of those people are interested in feeding birds. So when I'm selling, so to speak, the program to encourage insects, I'm not mentioning wasps very much. I'm not mentioning chipmunks very much. We have favored, I have quickly discovered we have favored critters among us. But to feed birds, we need to encourage insects. Again, according to Talamy, 90% of land bird nestlings, baby birds, not including like water birds, eat insects. You can imagine that a leaf is basically a little walking around, just gathering nutrients. Now, a caterpillar is a walking around leaf that basically walks around and gathers nutrients, and it remains soft. So a caterpillar is very easy for baby birds to digest before they're eating seeds. And Talamy has calculated that to raise a clutch of 5 chickadees takes 8,000 to 9,000 caterpillars. These are, in terms of providing benefit in your garden, these are his keystone species. So these are local numbers. For native oaks nationally support about more than 530 species of caterpillar. That's moths and butterflies, and these are the wildlife values judged by caterpillar species. So 456 species locally of caterpillars rely on native oaks. 345 rely on cherries, and there's some overlap and double counting in here because some species will need oaks and willows, for example. Anyway, so, but basically these are the keystone species that are the top of the chart. And if you're thinking of planting something, look for these guys. This is the woody list, top of the woody list. This is the top of the herbaceous plants list. So goldenrods and asters are really important because they support more than 100 species of caterpillars. And this is not the whole top of the list. I've kind of done a smattering of wildflowers to things that are recognizable. So, sunflowers and Joe Pye weed I've listed here just because we may know those. So the last thing of what does it take to certify a yard, sustainable steps, you need items from 2 of the 3 of these. So there are 3 categories: soil and water conservation, controlling exotic species, and organic practices. So soil and water conservation is like a rain barrel. It's like limiting your water using a drip hose, things like that. Creating a rain garden to absorb water. Controlling exotic species includes things like buckthorn removal, using native plants. So using native plants is not a requirement. I just really hope that we do that. Shrinking our lawn, reducing our lawn size by adding a pollinator garden, or even just planting a tree and then surrounding it with mulch so it reduces the size of our lawn. Those sorts of things, shrinking our lawn, are one of the things that we can count toward sustainable practices. And then things that are organic, using composting, or reducing the chemicals that we apply to our garden. All of those count, and you can do, most of us will do something in each of these categories probably. You're looking for probably a couple in each at least, but it's very much you don't have to do everything. You can do 2 out of the 3 groups. I wanted to call this out because what we're going for, I have a good friend who is he's really a botanist, but he told me, well, I'm team milkweed and I have milkweed bugs on my milkweed. So I'm getting rid of my milkweed bugs. So I just want to point out, we're looking for this. We're looking for insects to use our garden. We're looking to be team biodiversity and not either team insects or team milkweed, for example. So yeah, redefining garden success. We want to see things. This is a chokecherry and this is a violet that has been chomped on. So the other part of this is to do community organizing. And there are many more things that you can do to certify under national wildlife than these listed. These are just examples. So you do have to get a certain number of points in organizing and setting up the certification effort, like naming your what the name of the effort is. You don't have to name it, but you want to have have it named or have a team identified, or you want to do a press release. There are certain things to just get organized, and there are points for those things. I can't actually read the top of this because of the way this formats when I'm presenting, but that's okay. Next are outreach goals. You need 50 outreach goals. And it is like a menu of things that you can choose from. So improving weed ordinances locally, working to convert parkland to basically native habitat or wildlife friendly habitat. It does not have to be native, but we want to go for that if we can. Providing the NWF information at a booth or table, coordinating a cleanup or planting, all invasive species removal, all sorts of activities that we probably already have planned for the summertime. Education goals, you have to do 40 points there. Creating an information kiosk, that's kind of like one of those big window kiosk things near a park is what they're thinking of. Creating a brochure about our local, which we can easily do. I'm happy to help with that. Creating a brochure or fact sheet about the effort here that we can hand out to people and tell people, because that's extremely helpful to let people know that if they certify their yard, it counts toward getting the whole 3 counties here certified. Creating a website or web page, maintaining a Facebook page about the effort, writing a column or blog or something like that. And then there's kind of the sustainability of the effort, because what you want to have is something that will continue, that we won't really just stop when we, later on. So, who are the people who are going to carry this over post certification? Donating some photos to National Wildlife so that they can also talk about the success of this effort, those sorts of things. So there are different points required, but I do think this is going to be probably more or less the simplest thing. The beginning part and the end part takes some intentionality to kind of make it happen, but it's not too hard. So this is what we're going for. This is a neighbor of mine. You moved from Pachysandra to, this is her garden in about May, and this is her garden in about August. She's a bird lover, so she has overstory, understory, herbaceous layer, and ground cover, because birds like to have layered habitats. Some are tree canopy and some are ground nesting. So, and then this is another more restrained sort of pollinator garden, also a possibility. Here's some sources, and that's the end of my conversation with you all.
Thank you so much, Leslie. This is Kathy again, and I am unmuted. So I just really want to say how much I appreciate your leadership and showing us the way. I think it's just so much easier to believe that you can do it when you've talked to somebody who has been there. And for anybody who might have joined late, we met Leslie last fall when she talked about leading Evanston, where she lives about half the time when she's not in Michigan City, and she already got them certified. So we're going to be doing that same thing here regionally. I just want to make one small correction. We actually had some interest from Stark County, so we're going to be 4 counties: Lake, Porter, LaPorte, and Stark. And in our description on the National Wildlife Federation's site, it includes 7 counties that it talks about as being so rich in ecological diversity. So I really put an invitation out there to other counties surrounding us. And I have a vision that maybe one day the whole of Indiana could be certified as wildlife habitat. Wouldn't that be cool? But I'm getting away from myself. And we have another speaker. So at this point, I want to introduce Victoria Wittig. She's the former senior program specialist at Save the Dunes, and she's been here often. I'm sure a lot of you know her. And she was the lead on the Pollinator Garden Landscaping Guide that you're going to learn more about tonight. So for those of you who are really itching to dig in on the how-tos, I think you're going to love this part. And then we're hopefully going to have about 10 minutes or 15 minutes at the end to deal with some questions and some announcements. So let me turn it back over to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Kathy. And I'll just jump right in and start sharing my screen, as I recognize we might be a little bit short on time. So I'm hopeful that everyone can see my screen. Yes, thumbs up. Yes. All right, thank you. Yeah, so I'm the former senior program specialist at Save the Dunes. And while I was there, I had the great privilege of leading the creation of an absolutely beautiful and inspiring guide for the Indiana coastal region that sort of walks folks through the step-by-step opportunities they have to create pollinator sanctuaries in their own backyards. And so I'm not going to belabor much of this apart from to say that research has clearly shown that the Earth has moved out of safe operating space when it comes to biosphere integrity. This means extinctions per million species per year. And so, a lot of us hear about climate change and we're outside the safe operating space for climate change, but we're way outside the safe operating space for biodiversity. So there's a lot of research available for you to dig into that. And if you don't want to dig into the research, you could, stream a program on Facebook that's based on that research on planetary boundaries, and will help you to understand, why exactly is it that we're trying to certify an entire region or state for these pollinators and insects. Something that's really unfortunate, I was grateful that the insect apocalypse is here feature in the New York Times a few years ago was shared by Leslie in her presentation. And it's unfortunate that it's not hard to find these stories. More recently, there was an article in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences about the global insect decline. And even more recently, there was a feature in Reuters that touches on a lot of this research in a very interactive, easy to digest way. It's called The Collapse of Insects, and it was made available in December of 2022. So very recent. This is very real. A very real issue that's happening right now. But I'll stop there with all the bad news because it is true that you can help to protect biodiversity in your garden. And so while I was at Save the Dunes, I embarked on this passion project on how to inspire people with the most beautiful flowers, insects, artwork, science, stories, resources, so that it became irresistible for them to start getting involved in this. I mean, we all love flowers, of course, right? Everybody loves flowers, but what if you chose the beautiful flowers that have a really strong connection to insects in your region and the biodiversity in your region? And so this guide is jam-packed full of all kinds of resources. There are hard copies available. I highly recommend getting one. It's a beautiful guide, but it's also available online. And within it, you will find rich content on the 6 major ecosystems in the Indiana coastal region, 7 groups of native pollinators, dozens of native plants, 6 ecosystem-themed template garden designs with vetted lists of native plants from our 6 ecosystems that you could bring into your home garden, 4 absolutely beautiful illustrations of the seasonal changes in a pollinator garden, and lots of featured stories on, hot topic issues. Leslie mentioned the monarch and the rusty-patched bumblebee. There's also really great information on fireflies because research is showing that they too are pollinators, and boy, we don't want to lose our fireflies. And there's also a great section toward the end on the native plant sales, how to start and maintain your garden, including some of the points that Leslie raised on, how to generate that sort of habitat and get certified in your own yard. And so the way that I've broken this down for you tonight is essentially each spread of the pollinator guide, but they're not in order. So if you do have a copy and you're like, hey, Victoria, this is not in order, I did it on purpose because I'm trying to tell a story here. And so when you start to get into the guide, one of the first things that you'll see is this pre-settlement ecosystem distribution map of the Indiana coastal region. and a description of each of the ecosystems that correspond to their colors. So for example, where prairies were historically found, and a description of what those prairie ecosystems were comprised of, or their features and characteristics. Our coastal dunes, our dune and swale, which is a globally rare ecosystem, and we have some here in Northwest Lake County. Lots of wetlands across the region, all kinds of wetlands, every type you could dream of. Oak savanna, which is also globally rare, and our beautiful woodlands. So we have a description of each of these 6 ecosystems. And then Barb Labus, who some of you may be familiar with, as she created the ecosystems of the Indiana Dunes poster series. And so we enlisted her marvelous talents to showcase the beauty of a pollinator garden in each of the 4 seasons, because a pollinator garden is active the entirety of the year. And so right about now, what we're seeing on a lot of our favorite Facebook groups and pages is that some of our mining bees are coming out. The bloodroot is starting to bloom. The violets are going to get going here soon. Here you can, if you look closely, you can see a fritillary caterpillar that's munching and crunching on a violet leaf. Here's a beautiful bombus queen that's recently emerged from the leaf litter. Here's probably me in about a month's time collecting posies of violets in my yard. We've got a redbud, a serviceberry, Virginia bluebells, our Dutchman's breeches, our columbine, our lupins, our anemones, our tulip tree, our cherry tree, and it just goes on and on. Spring, I love spring. But summer is also a bounty for pollinators. And boy, if you really take a good make a good effort at incorporating native plants found in a variety of landscapes into your, a variety of ecosystems, pardon me, into your landscape, you could have this bounty as well. You know, milkweeds that the monarch butterfly relies on for food for its caterpillars. Here you see a caterpillar. Here also you see a monarch way station sign. So part of what Leslie was sharing and what Kathy is helping to connect us to an opportunity for is to certify our gardens through the National Wildlife Federation. But there's all kinds of pollinators that are going to really love you for doing this. And you're going to love them back, because man, it's just so incredible to go out into your garden, having done the hard work, sometimes backbreaking work to put these plants in, and the response is almost immediate. I mean, sometimes, you know, unfortunately, we've had a couple of bad years for our butterflies where a lot of us were saying, you know, I didn't see the butterflies in my garden as much this year. Well, the more that you plant, the more chance they have to persist in our landscape, and the more chance you have to enjoy them in your own backyard. But summer's not the end. Consider putting in a variety of species that bloom throughout the growing season. So in the fall, you know, think about a cardinal flower, you know, think about your gentians. If you look closely here, there's a little bee butt that's emerging out of this gentian, where the bee took a nosedive into this flower to collect the nectar and the pollen at the base of the flower. And our monardas will be waning at the end of the fall, our fall asters, our goldenrods. There's so many opportunities in the fall, not just in the summer, not just in the spring, but then also in winter, thinking about turning your landscape into habitat. You know, leaving the leaves in your yard, for example, that gives that beautiful bumblebee queen that's going to emerge in spring a chance to survive through what could be a very harsh winter. And she needs a healthy bed of leaf litter, as does the great spangled fritillary larva, which will also be emerging in spring. And so Barb did a marvelous job sort of connecting the dots for us and bringing inspiration into the equation, while also featuring people in the landscape. Because one of the joys of a pollinator garden is that it will be so irresistible for you to not be in it. You are going to want to be out there in your garden, and it's going to love you for it. So moving along, if you recall, there were 6 ecosystems in the Indiana coastal region that we pulled native plants from. So representative native plants that we were very selective in choosing for their beauty, their ease of growing, and their strong connection to supporting the life cycle of pollinators. And so we have these template garden designs that match each of the different ecosystems. So for example, Barb's spring artwork was based on a woodland planting, right? And so the species in that art panel could be found in this list. If you already have these plants and you want others, we made a list of alternatives. We wanted to give you as many options as you possibly could have. And so we also created those plant lists and template garden designs for the prairie, the oak savanna, the coastal dunes, the dune and swale, and the wetland. And here's a pond, which ties into what Leslie was discussing. And then here is sort of a map of what your house might look like. And so we realized that, you may not have every single one of these ecosystem types represented in your landscape, but you might have a few different kinds. For example, if you have a really bright, sunny front yard, that would probably be suitable for a prairie planting. If you have a very shady area, that would be suitable for woodland planting. And they don't have to be large. They don't have to match this exactly. It's whatever works for you. If you have very wet areas in your yard, poorly drained soils, a lot of us do in Northwest Indiana, wetland plants are great for that. And they're going to soak up a lot of that extra water. So this is where the money's at right here, is we had some really talented landscape designers create these spreads for us. And we hope that folks in the region find it useful. And also to say that this approach is applicable to anybody anywhere in the world. Once you understand what your native ecosystems are comprised of, you can take this approach too. And of course, you're going to need resources, and this is a great one for Indiana. So then another section in the guide showcases 7 groups of native pollinators, and we did a good job at selecting our favorite, most charismatic pollinators, because again, we want to inspire people. We want to cause them to be so excited about this that they can't wait to put these plants in their landscape. And then once they see these pollinators, they're going to be celebrating. This is a joy, this is a success, and they are making a meaningful impact on improving biodiversity in the region. Here's those featured stories to dig in a little bit deeper. And then I'd also mention that within each of the flags for the different groups or species that we mentioned, and of course, there's many, many more, especially in Northwest Indiana. There's some really great information on their sociality and diversity, when they're active, their nesting habits, their floral preferences, and in this case for the bees, pollen connection. Where do they collect pollen? Because they don't all collect it in the same spot. And of course, the butterflies, my goodness. Yes, I make a concerted effort to include the host plants, the caterpillar host plants for each of my favorite butterflies, because it does truly give me a sense of purpose in life to put those in my landscape and then see the result, see the fritillaries laying their eggs on my violets. It gives me so much joy, and I'm sure it will for you too. There's also a nice section on the moths, which it's sort of like the butterflies or the monarch are like the gateway bug. And like once you start to really love the butterflies, you start seeing moths and you notice the differences, you fall in love with the moths, which are these subtle beauties that have some of the most intricate and gorgeous designs on their wings. I mean, living works of art, and they'll be in your garden if you plant these pollinator plants. The hummingbird, we also have featured some beetles, like the hairy flower beetle, which is absolutely adorable. The flies are also pollinators. So the hoverfly or the great bee fly. And we had a very dedicated discussion about whether or not to include wasps, and we chose to include at least one, the great golden digger wasp. And there's a lot of information out there on why there's a misconception about wasps that could be easily overcome. Moving along, I think most folks would be really excited to learn that we also feature flags on each of the native plants that are directly connected to our pollinators and are found in one of our 6 ecosystem types. Now, the guide is arranged by their bloom time. And so starting out in the spring and going down, and then each page, getting later into the year. And again, each of these is closely associated with our pollinators. So lots and lots of beautiful native plants, lots and lots of beautiful pollinators. Again, we have these breakout stories on hot button topics like the rusty-patched bumblebee, which was recently listed, and the fireflies, which are now being recognized as pollinators. And this is very new science. So it's really exciting to have an opportunity to include this in such a beautiful guide. The guide then closes out with the fall plants, and also it features our some native trees, shrubs, and one vine, Virgensbauer clematis, that also have direct pollinator connections. And then there are these really great resources. What connects mostly to what Leslie was sharing earlier are the essential features of a pollinator garden. So if you download your copy of the guide or pick up your hard copy, you can use this as a bite-sized reference on how to incorporate these habitat features that are the essential that cover the essential needs of specifically the pollinators. But when you support the pollinators, you're also supporting everything else higher up on the food web, including the birds. And so at the bottom here, there's a list of our native plant sales, garden centers and nurseries that stock native plants, more resources, how to get certified. And it's very exciting to see this discussion happening now. Recommended reading, and also a call out to volume 1 of our Living in the Dunes series, which was a feature on invasive species. So if you haven't already, please go on over to savedunes.org, navigate to their resources tab, and download your free copy of this guide. It doesn't get better than that, right? You can also request this hard copy, which is beautiful, and I always have one handy myself. I also wanted to mention that 2 of our wonderful organizations in the region have their native plant sales coming up. So Wild Ones native plant sales on May 6th, and the Friends are having theirs on June 3rd. So I would encourage you to go on over to their website and check out what you need to know in advance. So, for example, the Friends, they really encourage you to place your order ahead of time, because I'm telling you, these plants sell out. If you have your heart set on a particular beauty featured in this guide or elsewhere, you better get there earlier, put your order in ahead of time. Don't fear if you have not, you don't have the time to do that or you can't attend. I'd also highly recommend Prairie Moon Nursery. They have online ordering, and that's year round. And so you're going to want to get over there really quick, though, because they sell out as well. Everybody wants to put natives in their garden right now. Also, check out the Indiana Native Plant Society. I'm getting notices from my friends that I need to wrap up, so I will. But I want to say thank you to everyone on the advisory committee, to the team at Save the Dunes, the project team, all of our wonderful funders. And also, I want to just leave you with this quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer, which is featured in the introduction of the guide. And I think I can take a few more seconds to read this out to you, because it needs to be heard, and it needs to be heard loud and widely. And it is that knowing that you love the earth changes you, It activates you to defend and protect and celebrate, like with pollinator gardens. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street to a sacred bond. And when you see these pollinators in your garden, when you see that you're supporting their babies, that bond will form, I guarantee it. So thank you. And I will stop sharing my screen and hand it over for our next segment.
Thank you. I know we don't have a lot of time left for Q&A, but thanks to Steve, who has been answering some questions in chat for people who had very specific questions about their own yard. And thank you to both of our speakers and to Nancy for arranging this. I think Leslie and Victoria really had such rich and relevant content. I didn't want to cut them short because although I knew we'd have questions, the replay will be great for so many people who can listen to this, who either were here or who just wanted to listen to it again, because there's so much great information. So if you do have questions, please put them in chat and we will do our best to see what we can do. Or if you have any announcements, maybe also put those in chat. I just want to call your attention to a couple things that I myself put in chat while some of the speakers were going. One is that in my role with Earth Charter Indiana, as Senior Resiliency Coordinator serving Northwest Indiana, I've been working with them on a regional climate action plan for the last year. And a lot of you have been good enough to show up for some of those sessions and give public input. They just, I believe yesterday, published the draft that will be open for public comment of their whole 2050 plan, which includes for the first time ever a section on climate. So you can go to NERC's website and look at 2050 and go to that. You may think, well, what does that have to do with native plants and creating, pollinator habitats and everything? Well, there are a lot of co-benefits that exist when you plant native plants for stormwater runoff. Rain gardens, but even just regular native plants have very deep tap roots that help with, crazy weather events, storm events that we've had. Many things beyond what I can do right here. And of course, just supporting the pollinators is great in and of itself. But so that's in the chat. And then for those of you who arrived a bit later, you may have missed the invitation that I put in chat to attend a couple of upcoming events in person where you can meet Leslie. Leslie's actually going to be hosting an event in June at her home in Michigan City, and she'll be on hand to talk about her own native plants and her experience. We're also going to have one April 19th in Porter. Specific locations to be announced once you sign up for that, but that's under meetup.com. And if you're listening to this rather than seeing the links in chat, you can just go to meetup.com and look for Northwest Indiana Permaculture Meetup. So that's that. And I want to give a shout out to the people who have stepped up to be part of the team, because this is something Kathy Sipple definitely cannot do alone. I need, a lot of help to get this done regionally to get to that points number that Leslie mentioned. So thank you to some of you who are saying, keep me in the loop. And Leslie has said that she wants to be kept in the loop and she will be our advisor. We've also got a great team forming. So I put my email in chat. If you're listening to this rather than here tonight, it's kasipple@gmail.com. So you can reach out to me and I will definitely loop you in. Steve is saying that on May 6th, Wild One South Bend chapter is having a native plant sale from 9 to 3 Eastern at Pinhook Park in South Bend. So he will be co-leading a walk on that newly installed native trail. So I'm sure that would be native tree trail. So that would probably be a really cool thing that people on this call would be interested in. The other thing I want to put out there is, even though we're going for a regional certification, one thing Leslie mentioned is the importance and kind of the design into the program of sustainability. That if you go through the step-by-step checklist, that the National Wildlife Federation has put together, you will actually have a great blueprint for, organizing your community. So one of the things of the Regional Climate Action Plan that we're really learning is we need more sustainability commissions like Michigan City has, or, possibly a Department of Green Urbanism like Gary has. Having those citizen groups or, governmental groups within a city are going to be necessary to actually get a climate action plan embedded and done. So one co-benefit of running this program perhaps in your own community to get your community certified while, simultaneously we're getting the regional certification, you get a database of neighbors who care about this topic. And that might allow you to have some more, localized meetups. And I know we're right at time, Nancy, with just like a minute to spare. So let me turn it back over to you and see how you'd
Thank
like to
you.
wrap things up.
Thank you. I do have an action. I have a couple events that I want to announce personally. Katie, did we have any questions come in on the Facebook in comments? No,
No.
great. Okay, there's one here that I think is an important one. What is the best way to keep the bugs outside and not in my house? And this is from Doug Ross. So would somebody like to take that one? And I think any three of you could do that. Steve Sass may be an excellent person to address that, Steve. I don't know, Katie, if you can unmute him. Steve, would you like to address that? How do I keep the bugs outside and not in my house?
Sure. By building obstructions so that they can't come in the house would be the easiest way, right? Screens, blocking off entrance ways, keeping your doors closed and your windows shut or covered by a screen, sealing cracks in the foundation and outside walls is really the easiest thing that you can do there. We never condone things like chemicals, obviously, unless it's an extreme circumstance where you have termite infestations or something like that. But the barriers would be by far the preferred way of going about that.
Thank you so much, Steve. Very excellent advice, actually. So the first event that I would like to announce is the Earth Month Extravaganza, and that's happening in Michigan City, Indiana on Saturday, April 29th from 12 to 4 p.m. That's going to be happening at Krieger Memorial Park. We did it last year. We had 20 tablers. We had over 300 participants. It's a very exciting time. There'll be a tree giveaway that Laura Henderson will be in charge of. And also there'll be seeds for free. So if you want to pick up seeds for flowers or seeds for your vegetable garden, this would be a good opportunity to do that. It seems like I missed something about that, but I don't know what it was. This event has been set up on the Michigan City Sustainability Facebook page. So just go there, click on it, and you can get all the information that you would ever want to have about this event. I want to give a shout out to Andy Jans Davis, who's the vice chair of sustainability. She's been doing an excellent job getting a lot of people there. Another event, which is happening on Earth Day, which is Saturday, April 22nd. This is going to happen from 4 to 6 p.m. I'm very excited. There's going to be a panel entitled Towards Sustainability, celebration of Earth Day along Lake Michigan. This is going to be happening at the Lebesnick Center from 4 to 6 p.m. This is a program that's going to be, it's actually sponsored by the Indiana Humanities and Indiana Landmarks. And there's a tour associated with this. You can actually have an opportunity to get into the House of Tomorrow, which is in Beverly Shores. Very rarely do you have a chance to do this. To do the tour of the house, it's going to take a pre-registration. Again, there's been a special event set up for this. You can go to Towards Sustainability, Celebration of Earth Day along Lake Michigan. Over the weekend, I'll be pushing this event out to Michigan City Sustainability, Green Drinks, Environmental Ideas, and my personal page will be there also, Nancy Moldenhauer. So you can get more information about this. It's going to be a most excellent event and an opportunity to hear from professional architects that are involved in the field of designing energy efficient homes and also looking at buildings from the historical perspective. And I'm one of the panelists too. So I'll be talking about the Michigan City Sustainability Commission. We have one action for this month. our governor Holcomb actually put in his budget $25 million for conservation efforts in the state of Indiana. And unfortunately, the House cut that down to $15 million. Right now, we have various champions in the Indiana Senate who are trying to get that back up to the $25 million level. So I'm going to ask each of you, please contact your senator, whoever that is in Indiana, and send them an email message or call them, especially after what we've heard presented tonight. It's really important that the state invests conservation dollars into our state parks, into our state forests, into all of these areas that support our butterflies and pollinators and other insects. So please promise me you'll do that. Especially people that are living in Porter and Lake counties. Your senators need to hear from you specifically. And also one of our senators in LaPorte County needs to hear from you also. I'm giving a shout out to Senator Rodney Pohl. I emailed him about this. He responded back to me and said, I'm going to look into this, and this will be a push from me to be sure that this happens. So if Rodney is your senator, send him a thank you note because he's on this. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Katie. She has an exciting announcement about our next green drinks, which is going to be happening on May 4th, which is a Thursday at 6:30. Katie, will you fill us in on what's happening next green drinks?
Sure. Our speaker is going to be a director of Humane Indiana Wildlife, Nicole Harmon. I'm a volunteer there and one of my very favorite organizations other than Save the Dunes, of course. So invite you all to join us to learn about native wildlife, and it's baby season. So it's a busy time in wildlife rehabilitation, and there are absolutely things that the community can do to help support not only wildlife, but also the rehabilitation center that is located here in Northwest Indiana in Valparaiso. So hopefully you can join us.
Thank you so very much. And if you would like to receive emails about Green Drinks offerings, you can go on to the Northwest Indiana Green Drinks page, and there's a little button you can click there. Kathy, I think the same button may be on 219 Green Connect. And if that doesn't work for you for some reason, then you can send an email to nancyforvision@gmail.com. And I will do my best to get your name on our list in a timely manner. And then the day of the event, we send out a little reminder to you also, because some of us are so busy, crazy that we can forget about things that are coming up that are important to us. So in closing, from heartfelt thanks to Leslie, to Victoria, and to Kathy, and I'll have to say 3 of my favorite people. This has been an amazingly awesome program, and each of you brought a different perspective to it, which gave us a real whole idea of all of the complexities that go into planning butterfly gardens and establishing pollinator sanctuaries. Thank you so very much. And that's a wrap.